Get ready, everyone. Today on the Gilbert.K Show, we're diving into the genius mind behind In the Heights, Tick, Tick, Boom, and some of the most iconic Sesame Street songs ever created. He's a Grammy, Emmy, and Tony-winning composer, arranger, and musical architect shaping the sound of Broadway, Hollywood, and childhood itself. Let's give a big welcome to the one and only Bill Sherman.
Hey, Bill, how are you today? Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. So, our first segment, we're going to talk about childhood spark. When you look back at your childhood, what was the first moment when sound or music hit you so deeply that you thought, okay, this is something I want in my life forever?
That's a really great question. I will say I grew up on Long Island in New York, and I was into sports. So I played a lot of soccer and ice hockey and basketball, and I was pretty hard set on being an athlete. And then for some reason, when I was in the third grade, I started playing the clarinet, and I got kind of into it. And I had this great teacher in fourth grade who was like, if you think the clarinet's cool, you should check out the saxophone. And I was like, okay. So then I did something which I admit to now, but at the time seemed kind of scandalous, is when he wasn't looking after our first or second lesson, I walked out with the saxophone. And I'm sure he noticed at the time, but I stole it. In my head, I stole it. And so I went home, and I don't know what happened, but I really fell in love with the saxophone and with jazz and with music in general. And sort of at that time, it didn't really become my thing, but it became something that sort of was like a hobby that I liked. And so I kept on playing sports, and I kept on sort of taking saxophone lessons and being musical. And then as I got further and further into high school, I just really music just became my thing. I stopped playing sports, and I just sort of really concentrated on being a musician, and I practiced all the time, and I sort of really, dug myself into it as far as I could. And I think it was then, the funny part about this, both my parents are doctors. And so they are very, to this day, sort of confused about what I'm doing, all the time. And so, even at age 45, they I think they might get it now, but in the past they were just very confused. And so I stopped playing, and I just would be up in my room practicing all the time. And then, I was graduating from high school. I had written a song for the graduation, and all my friends were like, who is this weirdo with the writing of songs? I'm like, who is this guy, And so I went and did that. And then I went to college. And then the interesting thing is you go to college, and suddenly the nerdy band kid who was kind of an outcast in high school becomes a more popular person. So I led a bunch of bands in college, and in college I met a bunch of people who would later become the sort of significant people in my career. When I was a sophomore in college, I met Lin-Manuel Miranda, the composer of Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera. And he and I became fast friends, and we've been working together ever since then. And he, at that time, said, hey, do you want to music direct a musical? And I told him two things. I was like, I don't know what that is, and I don't really like musicals. But I was like, okay, let's just try it. I think that was sort of my mantra at that time, and in college was like, I'll try anything. I'll try to play in this band, and I'll try to do that, whatever. And so yeah, and so from there it sort of just catapulted me into the world of musicals, and then TV, and then film, and whatever. But I think it was sort of around maybe 10th or 11th grade, I'd say, when I made a definitive switch to be a musician, and to really practice and love music. I think I knew then that it was going to be my thing around then.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Before the Grammys, the Emmys, and the Broadway milestones, what was that first early project where you felt like, I think I'm officially a composer now?
Oh, wow. That's funny you asked that. I wouldn't actually call myself a composer until later in life. So I was definitely a arranger, an orchestrator, a music director in my early 20s. And then the first song I actually composed was I got the job as the music director of the Electric Company when they were reviving the Electric Company on PBS. And, the first song I ever wrote was a song called Silent E, that had lyrics and that had a whole thing. And it later became this song that sort of became a big part of what was on the Electric Company. That was the first song I ever wrote. And right around then, I also wrote a song called What I Am, which was this big song on Sesame Street that Will I Am from the Black Eyed Peas had sang. Yeah. And that was sort of the first two songs that sort of meant anything to my career, and that definitely meant something to me. I did write a big band song. It was in this big band in high school that was sort of all of these kids from the tri-state area, and I wrote a song for that. But that wasn't like, I didn't look at that as composing. That was just sort of something I was doing. And so, but yeah, I would say that Silent E and What I Am were like the first two songs that sort of really like got me on a trajectory to become what people would call a composer.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your Grammy for the In the Heights album was a massive moment. What's one creative choice you made during that project, looking back, helped define your signature sound?
Oh, I feel like In the Heights was sort of responsible for qualifying or quantifying or creating what my signature sound sort of has become, which is like a sort of convincing blend of anything. I feel like a lot of the jobs that I have in life are sort of lead to this sort of genreless thing where you can sort of do every sort of genre as well as it could possibly be done. And I think the fun part about In the Heights was there was Latin music, there was merengue, there was salsa, and then there was hip hop, and then there was standard sort of Broadway things. And I think that was sort of a testament to the composer that Lynn was and the sort of message that we wanted to get across. I think within the Heights, it was like, what would it sound like if you walked from 179th Street to 181st Street? And like, what would be in the bodegas and in the things? And so it was super fun to like sort of like ensconce myself in Latin music and in hip hop and like do all that stuff and try to just make everything as convincing as possible and try to make those sounds, like, where did those sounds come from? Like, are they sampled? And where do those horns come from? And what is the piano player playing that sort of makes Latin music feel like Latin music? And what's the difference between merengue and salsa? And how does that work? And blah, blah, blah. And that sort of became like sort of everything else we did. And then later on, like with Hamilton and with Sesame Street and all the other stuff, it's just sort of become, how do you make the music of today sort of fit into these things? And how do you make them palpable for younger audiences or older audiences or whatever audience you want? And just sort of making everything, making the listener, making something that is acceptable to a listener and making sure that they, are able to digest it and are able to understand what you're trying to do. I think that's sort of been the calling card of everything I've done for my career, I think.
That's amazing. So you've won multiple Emmys for Sesame Street songs like What I Am and The Power of Yet. What's the real challenge in writing music that's simple enough for kids, but powerful enough that adults replay it for themselves?
It is the ultimate challenge. And people ask me all the time, like, what the secret is. And the answer is that there is no secret. It's just, when I tell other composers that want to write for Sesame Street or want to be sort of children's music composers is that the verse should be a hook and then the chorus should be a hook, because most kids songs don't last longer than 2 minutes. So you don't have a ton of time to like write a bridge or write a outro or whatever. So it's like, all killer, no filler. So if the verse is a hook, then you can sing back to yourself, and the chorus is a hook, and you have two great hooks. I feel like that's sort of the thing. And also just to not rush through it. I think sometimes we try to put too many words into children's songs because we're trying to teach so much. And so I feel like sometimes it goes by too fast. I feel like I'm always getting that note, which is it's too fast or we can't understand the words or whatever it is. And then I think with songs like Power of Yet and What I Am, like those are they're really hooky. And the other thing about those songs is that they sort of are earworms of today. So when a celebrity comes on Sesame Street, I think the ultimate compliment I get is, oh, that song would sound really cool on my next album. Like Janelle Monáe or Will I Am or whomever.
Yeah.
And so that always feels like the ultimate compliment. And so, you sort of just, when you're writing for other artists, you sort of just try to get in their head and then with Sesame Street, it's like, well, if that artist wanted to be on Sesame Street, what would it sound like? What would they do? And for the most part, I've been pretty successful at sort of figuring out what that is. Sometimes not so much, but most often than not, just sort of like getting in their head and getting into their music and then just trying to figure out what the best expression of that is. It's an interesting challenge, and it's very exciting and very overwhelming at times because, sometimes or more often than not, these are like the biggest pop stars on the planet. And you're just like, hey, here's the song I wrote for you. It's about the ABCs or whatever it is. And they're just usually super into it. But it's a definite challenge and really exciting part of what I do.
Wow. That's great. So you worked on Just in Time, earned a Best Musical Theater Album win. What made that project musically different from anything you've done before? And when did you realize that it might have award level potential?
I will say that I thought it had award level potential the first time I saw it. So the Just in Time cast recording is one of the coolest things I've done in my whole career. I wasn't like a huge fan of Bobby Darin, but I do. But you know, going into the catalog and listening to the music, um, it's unbelievably catchy and awesome music. I think that's sort of the first thing. And secondly, like what that show has sort of done to the music about how, sort of the rearrangements of it and sort of giving it a sort of current flair. And then of course with the cast led by Jonathan Groff, who's just sort of like this phenom, like bright shining star of musical theater, acting,
Yeah.
whatever, is such an amazing talent and person to watch that I felt like my job with that recording was sort of like not to get in the way. The job was to sort of let it speak and like find a sonic home for it. Like where, like, is it a big band album or is it a pop album or is it a whatever? And just trying to find sort of the macro tunnel to put it in. And then with Jonathan, it was always about like how to tell the story, because I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of those songs are fairly narrative in general. And so like it was very important to me that you could feel sort of his Bobby Darin and Jonathan Groff's sort of journey on the record.
Mhm.
And the band and the guy who did all the arrangements and orchestrations is this guy named Andrew Resnick, who's also the piano player and the music director, and he's unbelievable. And so sort of taking his lead sonically and then sort of harnessing this huge big band, which I've never made a big band record before. And so like I wanted to make sure that the horns were super convincing and that didn't sound like a music theater record, quote unquote, but it sounded like a real jazz record. And so we went
Yeah.
back and forth a lot of just figure out like what's the tone and what's the overall sonic idea. And
Yeah.
that was the biggest challenge. And then once we sort of figured that out, it was sort of figuring, it was then how do all these songs sort of fit into that thing. And I will
Mhm.
say, of the things that I've made in my life, that is one of the most greatest sounding albums I've ever been a part of. And I've been a part of some big ones, but that one really just the overall sound quality of it and the overall, like my daughters are 13 and 15 and
Yeah.
were not around when Bobby Darin was a thing, but listen to it all the time. And I hear them singing like Dream Lover and Splish Splash constantly, and they love it. So I feel like that's pretty cool because
Yeah.
it's not exactly for their demographic, but they're super into it. So I always feel like that's a success.
That's amazing. Just a follow-up question. So I had on my show a guest. He was saying that for each character, he has this different notes. Do you have the same concept or no?
Yeah, I think so. I also work on this musical called and Juliet, which is the Max Martin
Yeah.
pop musical, and that one more so than others has like sort of themes that sort of permeate the characters and sort of run throughout the thing. And that happens also in Just in Time. I think you know, like Splish Splash and Dream Lover and Mac the Knife all sort of intertwine the entire score to sort of give it this
And
cohesive feeling. But yeah, I think there's always a challenge with that. I think even more so like in movies and television, like you want to find a theme that really sits with the characters, and if you can sort of move it throughout the whole movie or throw in Easter eggs of it somewhere, I feel like that's sort of
Mhm.
some of the challenge and fun of it for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, we're gonna take a break and we're gonna play a game, this or that, and it's a rapid fire game. Are you ready, Bill?
Okay, I've never done this before. I'm super excited and nervous. Let's do it.
Okay, Broadway pit or Hollywood scoring stage?
Broadway pit.
Pencil and paper composing or full digital setup?
Full digital setup.
Lin Manuel or Sia vocal line? You can say
Oh.
both. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I have to say a little bit well, or I'm going to get in trouble. I feel like somewhere along the line.
Big orchestra or tight rhythm section?
Ooh, tight rhythm section.
Morning writing session or late night creative sprint?
Oh, morning. I'm a father, so I have to get up and put people on the bus to school. So yeah, morning, always.
Composing at home studio or a noisy cafe?
Home studio, my basement.
Sesame Street nostalgia or freestyle love supreme adrenaline?
Oh, geez, both. I feel like everyone in life should have some nostalgia and some adrenaline at the same time. That's a good
Yeah.
question though. That's a good one. I like that
Faster deadline or bigger challenge?
one. Oof. Bigger challenge.
Rewriting something good or starting something scary from scratch?
Rewriting something good.
And finally, music that makes people dance or music that makes people cry?
Dance. I've always been a dance guy. I led an African pop band in college, and I was always, my favorite part was just watching people dance to some nonsense I was playing. 100%.
That's great. Okay, we're gonna move
Also,
on.
I don't
to
think
our-
I've ever written anything. Also, I don't think I've ever
Yeah.
written anything that would make somebody cry. I don't like it. That's not my line of work, you know? So like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always like, I'm here to teach or like do something fun for children for the most part. And so like the idea of like writing a song that would make someone cry, I don't even know if I could do that. I never tried. Huh. Maybe one day.
Okay, we're gonna move on to our next segment. Latest work. You've been working on exciting new projects recently. What's something about your latest work, whether it's a show, a film, or a music collaboration, that pushed you in a new creative direction?
Wow. I've been working on a couple films, working on a couple children's shows. I think lately it's sort of been figuring out the best. I'm a big fan of making teams, and I always feel like the best way to do this job that I do is knowing that my opinion or my song isn't always the best opinion or song. And so I love bringing in other composers and making teams of things to sort of get the greatest
Yes.
possible outcome. And so lately it's been sort of like, do I go back and use the same team? Do I use new teams? Where's the loyalty versus not loyalty? And I sort of do like coming back and forth between those things. But I have found that like my best work is done with in a group setting where everybody understands that idea, which is your idea is not always the right idea. My idea is not always the right idea, but we're going to go with the best idea and everybody's going to win in the end, right? Or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I feel like sort of using we as like a thing as opposed to I, because I've been in this business quite a while now, which is weird to finally be able to say. I just turned 45 like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And so I can refer to things as 20 years ago and really remember them. And I can also say my career and it means something. So throughout my career, the point of that is throughout my career, I've gotten pretty far by just sort of staying humble and staying beneath the radar and knowing when like ego is not a thing and knowing when to really use the people around you and to really collaborate. And I feel like, I know that sounds like a sort of a people management cliche, but I'm a firm believer in collaboration and best idea in the room wins. And when it doesn't, it should. And sort of knowing when that is and knowing when to go back. Maybe you glossed over something that was really a great idea and you forgot, or you just glossed over it because for whatever reason. So yeah, I feel like that, but not even a challenge, but more so just like something that comforts me and something that pushes me along is this idea of team formation. And so like, that's sort of what I've been going after as much as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. You've shaped Broadway and then brought that emotional pulse into films like Tick, Tick, Boom. What's the biggest mental shift you make when moving from orchestrating for the stage to scoring for the screen?
Oh, wow. So orchestrating for the stage, I think it's interesting. So stage stuff is like people are playing it live every single night, sometimes twice a day. And movies, like once you finish it, it's done. And so there's like a different, I don't know what the right word is. There's a different mantra that I go with where it's just like, granted, they are playing the same thing that you wrote every night, even though it is in a live setting. But I feel like you sort of leave with the theater stuff. I think you leave some of it up to interpretation, knowing that it's going to be different every night. And I think with movies and stuff, it's like what's on the page is what's happening, whatever. That being said, I think particularly for things like Tick, Tick, Boom, which is like a, like a rock score, I think we kept it very open-ended anyway. And like a lot of the rhythm section stuff is just people crushing the rhythm section, So, it is very different headspaces for me. Like Also, I feel like scoring for film is very mathematical, and like it's
Yeah,
very like, what you see on the screen and time codes and things like that, which is a different sort of brain space for me. Whereas the
yeah,
theater stuff, while also mathematical, is just it's a different sort of thing. It's a different way of thinking. And yet at the end of the day, it's sort of the same job, right? Whether you're orchestrating for a theatrical experience or orchestrating for a thing, you're still orchestrating, right? And
yeah,
so it just I don't know, but for whatever reason, I don't know that it's like a tangible thing, but like it
yeah,
does to me feel very different
yeah,
in my
yeah.
head.
That's amazing. So working on a beloved legacy piece is tough. What was your this is about the Tick Tick Boom. What was your approach to preserving Jonathan Larson's voice while still letting your own emotional style come through in Tick Tick Boom?
Sure. So when we were first talking about Tick Tick Boom, me and Lynn and our other collaborator Alex Lackamore, Lynn was very interested in like rearranging the songs, and like having them sort of have a flair that made them feel like something new, not necessarily something that was on the off Broadway recording or something that was in one of Jonathan's movies or whatever.
Yeah,
But then he wanted the underscoring. All of the underscoring in Tick Tick Boom, if I'm remembering correctly, is Jonathan Larson music. And all we did was sort of rearrange it and move it around and, excuse me, and reshape it for the most part. And so that to him was sort of this way of Lynn and us to pay homage to Jonathan, which was really cool because there's all kinds of music that Jonathan Larson wrote that people have never heard or
mm,
don't know about. And so it was really fun. And also, for what it's worth, so when I was 22, Lynn and I were roommates for many years, and the thing that we played the most often was the off-Broadway recording of Tick Tick Boom. And so I had that in my head for so long, and it was such a big part of my 20s and my childhood and whatever. So
yeah,
getting the opportunity to sort of go back and revisit it was very full circle and very weird. And so I remember listening to that recording and being like, oh man, if I could have done this, I would have done it like this. And then I got the opportunity to do that, which was really fun. And so I remember sitting right here and sort of listening to Come to Your Senses or 3090 and being like, oh, that sounds like a different time. What if it was now? And sort of already having done some of the work in my head in
yeah,
the past 20 years. And then it was like, okay, now sit down and actually do it. So it was a super great project. And it was also very strange because Tick Tick Boom was filmed during COVID. And so like that was a whole situation.
yeah,
But it was a really, really fun experience, particularly because that music meant so much to me as a 20 something and now getting,
yeah.
later in life to be a part of it as well. So that was cool. It was great.
That's amazing. Collaboration energy. You've collaborated with Lin Manuel Miranda Sia and Freestyle Love Supreme. You've collaborated with some widely different creative minds. What's one lesson collaboration taught you that permanently changed how you compose?
Oh, wow. I think again, just sort of going back to what we were talking about before, this
Yeah,
idea of the best idea in the room wins. I think that to me is the best part of collaboration. And also, I think I think people have very specific talents. I know that I do. Like I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm fairly good at a couple things. And so I think like finding the collaborators that sort of create the Voltron for you, they create the like this guy's good at this guy's good at this, and when you put them together, it's the great thing. I feel like that to me is always the challenge. It's like finding the right guy, the right person that does lyrics, the right person that knows how to make beats, the right person that knows how to use
yeah,
this or whatever it is, and sort of figuring out how to make the sum of those parts be the best possible thing. That to me is sort of what I do. People always ask me like what I actually do, and like on a day-to-day basis it's all very different, but like I think for the most part, like creating a team, finding the right collaborators, and then pushing the outcome or what the expectations are for this thing as far up, as far
right.
into the stratosphere as possible. I feel like that's my job, is just to push it and get it to a certain place that I know what it is in my head, that I can hear it, where I can hear it in my head. And so like getting these people to sort of, including myself, to sort of rise and just make the sum of their parts better than the thing. I think that's, if I had to make a really long business card, that's what would be on my business card. There you go.
That's amazing. So if you could sit with your childhood self and play one Grammy, Emmy, or Tony winning piece of your music, which one would you choose? And what do you think young Bill would say hearing it?
Wow. Yikes. That's a really good question. One piece of music. Um, we've done so much cool stuff. I mean, the thing that still brings, there's two things that bring tears to my eyes, and they're both actually from In the Heights. Okay, so there's a song in the Heights called Champagne, which is the latter part of the thing, where it's these two people who loved each other for so long. And I remember hearing when Lynn played that for us the first time, I remember thinking like, this is totally the wrong song. I don't think this is right at all. And then he's like, I was like, it doesn't have a chorus. It doesn't do anything. Like, what are we doing? And he's like, it's a conversation between two people who love each other, or whatever it was, whatever he said. I made that up, but whatever he said. And it now is a moment in that movie, no matter what I'm doing, it makes me cry almost every time. And so I feel like that's sort of an example of like knowing when you're wrong. And I feel like that's a lesson I would like to tell young Bill, is like, know when you're wrong. And then at the same time, know when you're right. So like in that same show, like at the end of the finale in the Heights, there's this whole build up to get to the end of the thing. And I remember sitting at a piano, totally doubting myself, mostly because I wasn't a great piano player, but sort of figuring out how to make this continually build and build and build. And I finally figured it out, but I was so unsure of myself. So I played it for a bunch of people, and they were like, holy shit, that's it. And then it was like, and so that was a moment in the same show where it was like sort of know when you're wrong and know when you're right. And I feel like if that's a lesson that you can understand, if that's a lesson I could teach myself, that may be the most important thing. That, and stay humble, because narcissism and an ego does not help you in this business whatsoever. And don't be afraid. Oh, and my other thing, which I tell people all the time, which I would tell young me too, which young me did, for the record, is in the beginning, is say yes to everything, because you never know who you're going to meet, or who you're going to work with, or how your career is going to form. But you have to say yes until you can say no. So at least at the beginning, like I wouldn't have met Lynn if I didn't say yes to music directing a musical, when I didn't even know what music directing or musicals really were. And so here I am years later, and this is what I do for a living. It was not my dream or goal at that time or any time to do this. And so, but I'm happy I'm here. But at that moment, it was just, I said yes. And then, things happen and whatever, it's just a combination of luck and hard work and whatever. But at the time, it was like, I just said yes. And then I figured it out. And I feel like that's sort of been sort of how I've run my career the whole time. It's like, do you know how to music direct a television show? Yes. I had no idea how to direct a music television show, but I figured, and that was the electric company. They're like, have you ever music directed a television show? I said, no. She's like, do you know how to do it? I was like, absolutely.
Yes.
And then I just figured, so there you go.
That's amazing. That's a great tip, actually. That's an amazing tip.
Yeah.
So finally, Bill, so you've done it all. Grammy, Emmy, Tony. Is there a dream project you'd like to do? Is there anything that you haven't done you'd like to achieve?
If my mother were here, she would say I really should win an Oscar so that I can be an EGOT. She's very important to her in her whole life, that she wants me to be in that realm of no, I have been a part of some of unbelievable things that when you look back on it, it's difficult to take in at times, and it's very overwhelming. I always feel like the next project I'm doing should be that project. It's the next thing I want to do. I don't know that there's like an end all be all gig for me. When I was a kid, I thought like scoring a film was the pinnacle. And then I've scored films, and that felt like a pinnacle at the time, but now it's just like another thing, So, and then I met a kid the other day who was like, I want to score films. And he clearly was looking at it as this pinnacle. And I was like, then you should go do that. And then in New York, for example, like if you're a musician, like being a regular in a pit orchestra, that's like the peak for them. But then they do other things. So anyway, I feel like my career has sort of been a lot of peaks and valleys. And so I like to sort of keep it that way, so that, you're always striving for something new, and you're always, willing to try something if you are given the opportunity, and you're willing to sort of like do something that's less of a big deal, so that you can sort of, you gauge where your life is and stuff like that. Because sometimes if the peaks get too high, then you're always searching for that peak, and that's hard. Whereas sometimes it's okay to just like go down the middle. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you what's one thing I'd like to work on the Super Bowl. I don't know, or something silly or crazy like that. But for now, I love what I do, and I can't, and there are days where I wake up and people are like, is that really a job? And I was like, yeah, it's my job. And they're like, well, that's not a real thing. I was like, well, it's what I do. And so that's that, So I don't know. I couldn't say that there's one thing, but I hope that, whatever the next thing that comes up is as exciting as the previous one.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Bill, we're nearing the end of the show. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. Bill Sherman, everyone. Thank you, Bill.
Absolutely, Gilbert. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.